Welcome to this week's Bible reading from Spark Story Bible from Sparkhouse Publishing. And this week we are going to read about the plagues. So this can be a little confusing and maybe even a little scary, but it's an important story of the Old Testament in the life and experience of the Israelites and Moses that we've been following for a few weeks. So if you want to follow along in your own Bible, it comes from Exodus chapter 7, beginning with verse 14 through chapter 12, verse 32. The plagues. God gave Moses a big job. Moses had to stand up to a very stubborn king who was making God's people work as slaves. Remember that story, right? God told Moses to go to the Pharaoh, that's the king they were talking about, and say, "Let my people go." Pharaoh said, "No, I will not let God's people go." Pharaoh wanted the people to worship him, not God. So God used 10 ways, called plagues, to change Pharaoh's mind. God turned the Nile to blood. The river began to stink. Pharaoh watched the river turn red, knew his people could not drink, and Pharaoh still said no. God sent frogs to hop everywhere, even into beds. Pharaoh heard the bakers scream when frogs jumped out of their breads, and Pharaoh still said no. See the frogs there, and Moses and Pharaoh. And God thought gnats might change Pharaoh's mind so the people could go free. Gnats swarmed people, goats, and cows. There was no place to free. And Pharaoh still said, no. Flies, thought God, will do the trick. And so God sent a zillion. Pharaoh's house filled up with flies. Outside there were a million, and Pharaoh still said, no. God struck down Pharaoh's herds. The camels all were ill. The donkeys, horses all got sick. The cows fell down, but still the Pharaoh said no. Oozy, gooey, icky sores on everybody's skin. God knocked and knocked on Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh never let God in, and Pharaoh still said no. Hail pounded, thunder crashed, Pharaoh's plants laid down. Not a tree stood anywhere. All were on the ground. And Pharaoh still said, no. Let my people go, said God, or I will send a swarm of locusts to devour what's left, to do your land more harm. And Pharaoh still said no. Now darkness covered Pharaoh's land. The sun did not appear. No one could move. No one could see. Still Pharaoh would not hear. And Pharaoh still said no. The last and the saddest plague of all brought sobs throughout the lands. Parents cried as their children died. Finally, Pharaoh changed his plans. Pharaoh let God's people go. What plague would you least like to have come and visit you and your family, and why? And talk about that this week. And then also talk about how God never gives up. Knew that one way or the other, Pharaoh would come around and let God's people go.